For 6 weeks, Russian military planners believed they had solved Ukraine's artillery problem. They were catastrophically wrong. France just delivered a weapon system to Ukraine so sophisticated, so lethal, and so perfectly designed for the kind of warfare grinding across the Donbass that Russian commanders are watching their carefully constructed defensive networks dissolve in real time. This is not about quantity. This is not about replacing Soviet-era systems with Western equivalents. This is about a technological leap that fundamentally changes what Ukraine can do to Russian positions from distances Russia cannot effectively counter. And Moscow never saw it coming until French-made shells started landing with precision that Russian forces thought was impossible. Welcome to States News. If this is your first time here, subscribe and turn on notifications, because what we are covering today is not just another weapons delivery announcement. This is about understanding why specific capabilities matter more than raw numbers, why timing and weapons transfers can determine the outcome of entire campaigns, and why France's decision to provide this particular system represents a strategic calculus shift that has implications far beyond the immediate battlefield effects. We do not do surface-level coverage here. We analyze the second-order effects, the doctrinal implications, and the geopolitical consequences that actually determine how wars are won and lost. I am going to show you exactly what France delivered, why this specific artillery system represents a generational advantage over what both Ukraine and Russia have been using, and what this reveals about Western strategy for the next phase of this conflict. We will cover the technical specifications that make this system unique, the tactical employment doctrine that maximizes its effectiveness, the strategic implications for Russia's defensive posture across the entire front line, and the geopolitical messaging embedded in France's decision to transfer this capability now. By the time we are done, you will understand why Russian forces are not just facing a new weapon, but confronting a fundamental shift in the artillery balance that they have no immediate answer for. Because what arrived in Ukraine in late March 2026 was not just hardware. It was a force multiplier that changes the mathematics of artillery warfare in ways that favor Ukraine's operational approach and punish Russia's defensive doctrine. To understand why this particular French system matters so profoundly, you need to understand the evolution of artillery warfare in the Ukraine conflict and where both sides stood before this delivery. Artillery has been the dominant killing mechanism throughout this war, responsible for an estimated 60 to 80% of all casualties on both sides. This is not precision drone strikes making headlines. This is industrial-scale bombardment that defines the daily reality of combat operations across hundreds of kilometers of front line. Whoever can deliver more accurate fire at longer ranges with faster response times wins the artillery duel, and whoever wins the artillery duel controls the tempo of ground operations. Russia entered this war with massive artillery advantages in both quantity and initial stockpiles. Soviet doctrine had always emphasized tube artillery and multiple rocket launchers as primary fire support, and Russia inherited enormous inventories of D-30 howitzers, two S-19 EMSTA self-propelled guns, and BM-21 Grad rocket systems. In the early months of the invasion, Russian forces were firing an estimated 20,000 shells per day, compared to Ukraine's 6,000 to 7,000. That volume advantage allowed Russia to flatten Ukrainian defensive positions and advance despite horrific casualties. It was World War I, mathematics applied with 21st century weapons. Whoever can afford to fire more steel wins the ground. But artillery warfare is not just about volume. It is about accuracy, range, survivability, and time from target acquisition to rounds on target. Soviet-era systems that both Russia and Ukraine relied on were designed for mass bombardment of general areas rather than precision engagement of specific targets. Their maximum effective ranges topped out around 24 to 30 kilometers depending on ammunition, and their accuracy was measured in hundreds of meters rather than tens of meters. You compensated for inaccuracy with volume, firing dozens of shells to ensure hits on the target area. This works when you have unlimited ammunition. It becomes unsustainable when your stockpiles start running low and your opponent starts receiving precision systems. Ukraine's artillery situation began changing in mid-2022 when Western countries started delivering M777 towed howitzers, Caesar self-propelled guns, and eventually M109 Paladin systems. These represented significant upgrades in accuracy and range, particularly when paired with NATO standard 155mm precision-guided munitions like Excalibur rounds. But they came in limited quantities, never enough to completely replace Ukraine's Soviet-era systems, and the precision ammunition was expensive and supply-constrained. Ukraine could achieve local artillery superiority in priority sectors, but not across the entire front simultaneously. Russia, for its part, adapted by building layered defensive networks designed specifically to withstand artillery bombardment. The defensive lines constructed across occupied Ukrainian territory in 2023 and early 2024 represented sophisticated engineering. Multiple trench lines separated by dragon's teeth obstacles and minefields, artillery positions dug into revetments that protected against all but direct hits, command bunkers buried deep enough to survive anything short of precision bunker-busting munitions. These defenses were designed assuming Ukrainian artillery would consist of either Soviet-era systems with limited range and accuracy or Western systems in quantities too small to sustain prolonged bombardment across wide frontages. That assumption held through most of 2025 and into early 2026. Ukrainian offensives ground forward at enormous cost, measuring progress in hundreds of meters rather than kilometers, because breaking through prepared Russian defensive positions required concentrations of artillery fire that Ukraine could only sustain for limited periods in limited locations. Russian forces could absorb Ukrainian artillery strikes, wait out the bombardment in protected positions, and counterattack once Ukrainian forces advanced into kill zones. The mathematics of attrition favored Russia as long as this dynamic persisted. Then France delivered the Caesar NG. On March 22, 2026, French Defense Minister Sébastien Lecornu confirmed that France had transferred an undisclosed number of Caesar NG next-generation self-propelled howitzers to Ukraine, along with a substantial ammunition package and French military trainers to accelerate Ukrainian crew integration. This was not the original Caesar system that France had already provided in earlier tranches. This was the newest variant, the Nouvelle Génération model, that had only entered French service in 2024 and represented the cutting edge of French artillery technology. The Caesar NG is a 150mm self-propelled howitzer mounted on an 888 armored truck chassis, but those basic specifications do not capture what makes this system revolutionary. The original Caesar was already highly regarded for its mobility, accuracy, and rapid deployment capability. The NG variant takes every dimension of performance to a new level. Maximum range with standard ammunition is 42 kilometers. With rocket-assisted projectiles, it reaches 55 kilometers. That is nearly double the effective range of the Soviet-era systems that still constitute the majority of Russian artillery, and it outranges even Russia's most modern systems by meaningful margins. But range is only part of the story. The Caesar NG incorporates fully automated fire control systems that calculate firing solutions in seconds rather than minutes. The crew receives target coordinates through digital data links connected to Ukrainian reconnaissance networks, including drones, counter-battery radars, and forward observers. The fire control computer automatically accounts for meteorological conditions, ammunition type, target distance, and required precision. The crew confirms the solution and fires. From receiving target coordinates to first rounds downrange takes under 60 seconds for trained crews. For comparison, Soviet-era systems require 5 to 10 minutes for the same process. That speed is lethal because it collapses the kill chain. Modern artillery warfare is fundamentally about the observe, orient, decide, act loop. Whoever completes this loop faster wins. Ukrainian reconnaissance drones identify a Russian artillery position. Those coordinates get transmitted to a Caesar NG battery. The battery fires, lands precision rounds on target, and displaces to a new firing position before Russian counter-battery systems can even calculate where the fire originated. The Russian position is destroyed or suppressed. The Ukrainian system survives to engage the next target. Repeat this process across dozens of Russian positions, and you start eroding Russia's artillery capability faster than they can regenerate it. The survivability dimension deserves emphasis because it addresses one of Ukraine's most critical vulnerabilities. Russian forces have extensive counter-battery radar coverage and substantial quantities of Lancet loitering munitions specifically designed to hunt artillery systems. Ukrainian artillery crews operating Soviet-era towed guns or even earlier Western self-propelled systems faced constant threat of counter-battery fire. They had to fire and displace quickly, which limited the number of rounds they could put on target before moving. The Caesar NG's shoot and scoot capability is so rapid that crews can deliver 6 to 8 rounds on target and be moving to a new position within 3 minutes of firing the first shot. Russian counter-battery systems simply cannot react fast enough to catch them. The ammunition package that accompanied the Caesar NG delivery is equally significant. France provided not just standard high-explosive shells, but precision-guided munitions, including bonus anti-armor cluster rounds and extended-range rocket-assisted projectiles. The bonus rounds are particularly devastating against Russian armor concentrations. Each 155mm bonus shell contains 2 sub-munitions equipped with infrared sensors that detect armored vehicles as the munitions descend under parachute. When a vehicle is detected, an explosively formed penetrator fires downward through the thinnest top armor. One Caesar NG firing bonus ammunition can effectively engage multiple armored vehicles from ranges where Russian systems cannot return fire. Think about what this capability means for Ukrainian operational planning. Russia's defensive doctrine relies on artillery positioned behind defensive lines, providing fire support for infantry holding trenches. Those artillery positions have been largely immune to Ukrainian counter-battery fire because Ukrainian systems either lacked the range to hit them or lacked the precision to guarantee kills at maximum range. The Caesar NG changes that equation entirely. Ukrainian forces can now reach out to 50-plus kilometers with precision fire, hitting Russian artillery in positions Russian commanders considered safe. This forces Russian artillery to either move further back, reducing their own effectiveness in supporting defensive positions, or accept attrition rates they cannot sustain. The tactical implications cascade across multiple dimensions of ground warfare. First, Ukrainian mechanized forces gain artillery overwatch that can suppress Russian positions before Ukrainian armor comes within range of Russian anti-tank systems. The Caesar NG can provide precision fire support from positions 40 kilometers behind advancing Ukrainian units, hitting Russian positions that threaten the advance with minimal risk of counter-battery destruction. This fundamentally changes the risk calculus for Ukrainian offensive operations. Second, Ukrainian forces can conduct sustained counter-battery operations that gradually degrade Russian artillery capability across entire sectors. Russian forces have been rotating artillery units to preserve equipment and maintain fire support capacity. If Ukrainian forces can destroy or suppress Russian artillery faster than Russia can rotate in replacements, the artillery balance shifts decisively in Ukraine's favor. Early reports from Ukrainian forces employing Caesar NG systems suggest they are achieving exactly this effect in sectors where the systems are concentrated. Third, and this is where it gets genuinely interesting, the Caesar NG enables Ukrainian forces to target Russian logistics nodes and command posts that were previously considered too deep behind Russian lines for conventional artillery engagement. Russian forces have been operating supply dumps, ammunition storage sites, and forward headquarters at distances they calculated were safe from Ukrainian tube artillery. Those calculations are now obsolete. Ukrainian forces can hit targets 50 kilometers deep into Russian-held territory with precision fire, forcing Russian logistics to move even further back, which extends Russian supply lines and reduces operational efficiency. But the strategic implications go beyond immediate battlefield effects. France's decision to transfer the Caesar NG represents a significant shift in European strategic thinking about Ukraine's military requirements. For much of 2024 and 2025, Western countries provided enough military aid to prevent Ukrainian defeat, but not enough to enable decisive Ukrainian victory. This reflected concerns about escalation management, weapons stockpile preservation, and political sustainability of long-term military support. The Caesar NG transfer suggests France has concluded that providing Ukraine with qualitative military advantages that can change battlefield dynamics is preferable to indefinite provision of quantities sufficient only to sustain attrition warfare. This shift is particularly significant coming from France because French strategic culture has historically prioritized European strategic autonomy and maintained ambivalence about full commitment to indefinite support for Ukraine. President Macron has oscillated between calls for negotiated settlements and stronger support for Ukrainian military capability. The decision to transfer France's most advanced artillery system indicates that French strategic assessment now prioritizes Ukrainian battlefield success over premature negotiation from positions of weakness. France is providing Ukraine tools to win artillery duels, not just survive them. The geopolitical messaging embedded in this transfer extends beyond bilateral French-Ukrainian relations. This is a signal to other European nations that technological superiority can substitute for numerical superiority in supporting Ukraine. Germany, which has been reluctant to provide certain advanced systems due to escalation concerns, now faces pressure to match France's commitment. Poland, which has been pushing for more aggressive Western support, sees validation of its position. And crucially, this puts pressure on the United States to accelerate deliveries of its own advanced systems or risk European partners taking leadership in determining the pace and nature of Western military support. For Russia, the Caesar NG delivery represents a strategic problem with no easy solutions. Russian artillery doctrine is deeply embedded in force structure, training, and operational planning. You cannot simply redesign your entire approach to artillery warfare in response to a new enemy capability. Russian forces will attempt tactical adaptations, dispersing artillery more widely, positioning systems at greater depths, improving camouflage and deception, and increasing air defense coverage over artillery positions. But these adaptations come with costs. More dispersed artillery means less concentrated fire support. Greater depth means longer response times and reduced effectiveness. Enhanced defensive measures mean more resources diverted from offensive operations. Russia could attempt to develop or acquire counter systems that match Caesar NG capabilities, but this is not a short-term solution. Russia's defense industrial base is already strained, meeting demands for ammunition, armored vehicles, and precision munitions to replace combat losses. Developing new artillery systems would require years, even under ideal circumstances, and Russia's access to advanced components has been severely restricted by sanctions. Acquiring equivalent systems from foreign sources is theoretically possible. China and North Korea both produce artillery systems, but nothing in either country's inventory matches the Caesar NG's combination of range, precision, automation, and survivability. The second-order effects ripple through Russia's broader strategic position. Every Russian artillery system destroyed by Caesar NG fire is one less tube available for supporting operations across the entire front line. Russia has been drawing down artillery stockpiles faster than production can replace them, a dynamic that Western intelligence agencies have been tracking closely. If Ukraine can accelerate the attrition rate of Russian artillery through superior counter-battery capability, Russia faces a declining artillery advantage that cannot be easily reversed. This has implications for Russia's ability to conduct offensive operations, hold captured territory, and sustain the current operational tempo. For Ukraine's Western partners, this development creates both opportunities and questions. The opportunity lies in demonstrating that precision capabilities can achieve disproportionate effects relative to investment. France delivered a limited number of Caesar NG systems. Exact numbers remain classified, but the battlefield impact appears to exceed what much larger quantities of conventional systems achieved. This validates the argument for quality over quantity in military aid, potentially making it easier to justify additional transfers of advanced systems that may be expensive but deliver decisive advantages. The questions center on sustainability and integration. Ukrainian forces now operate a diverse mix of artillery systems from multiple countries, each with different ammunition requirements, maintenance needs, and crew training standards. This logistical complexity creates vulnerabilities. If ammunition supplies for Caesar NG systems run short, those systems become useless regardless of their technical superiority. If maintenance support proves inadequate, systems break down and cannot be repaired. Managing this complexity requires sophisticated logistics infrastructure and sustained Western support, neither of which can be taken for granted. Now, we need to acknowledge the limitations and uncertainties that any honest analysis requires. The actual number of Caesar NG systems delivered remains undisclosed, and this matters enormously for assessing battlefield impact. If France delivered 10 systems, that is a capability that can influence operations in a limited sector. If France delivered 50 systems, that is a capability that can reshape artillery balance across significant portions of the front line. Without confirmed numbers, we are assessing potential impact rather than verified results. There is also the question of Ukrainian crew proficiency and integration timelines. The Caesar NG is a sophisticated system requiring extensive training for maximum effectiveness. French military trainers are reportedly working with Ukrainian crews, but achieving full operational capability takes time. Early employment might not demonstrate the system's full potential if crews are still learning optimal tactics and procedures. We should expect Ukrainian effectiveness with these systems to improve over time as experience accumulates. We should also consider Russian adaptation capacity. Russian forces have demonstrated throughout this war an ability to learn from tactical setbacks and implement countermeasures. After Ukrainian HIMARS systems decimated Russian ammunition dumps in 2022, Russian forces dispersed their logistics and improved camouflage discipline. After Ukrainian air defenses proved effective against Russian aircraft, Russian forces adjusted tactics to minimize exposure. We should expect similar adaptation to the Caesar NG threat, and some of those adaptations will reduce the system's effectiveness, even if they cannot eliminate it entirely. There is also the broader question of whether artillery superiority translates to territorial gains. Ukraine has learned painfully that destroying Russian defensive positions with artillery does not automatically enable successful offensive operations. Russian minefields, anti-tank systems, and reserve forces can still inflict prohibitive casualties on advancing Ukrainian mechanized units, even when Russian artillery has been suppressed. The Caesar NG solves the artillery problem. It does not solve the combined arms problem of translating fire superiority into sustained territorial advances against prepared defenses. So where does this leave us, and what should we be watching for as this situation develops? The Caesar NG delivery represents a qualitative shift in Ukraine's artillery capability that Russia was not prepared for and has no immediate counter to. Whether this translates to decisive battlefield advantages depends on quantities delivered, Ukrainian tactical proficiency, sustainability of ammunition supplies, and integration with broader offensive operations. What we can say with confidence is that Russian artillery forces are facing a threat they have not previously encountered in this war, and their response will shape artillery dynamics for the next phase of the conflict. Watch for several indicators over the coming weeks and months. First, reported Russian artillery losses. If open-source intelligence tracking of destroyed Russian artillery systems shows acceleration, that would confirm Caesar NG systems are achieving their intended counter-battery effects. Second, changes in Russian artillery positioning. If Russian forces start pulling artillery back to ranges beyond even Caesar NG reach, that would indicate genuine concern about survivability, but it would also reduce Russian fire support effectiveness. Third, French and European responses. If the Caesar NG proves as effective as early reports suggest, we should expect pressure on other European countries to provide their own advanced artillery systems, potentially including German PZH-2000 variants or British AS-90 systems. The most important long-term implication may be what this reveals about the shifting European approach to Ukraine military support. For 2 years, European countries have been calibrating their military aid to avoid either Ukrainian collapse or Ukrainian victory that might destabilize broader European security architecture. The Caesar NG transfer suggests that calculus is changing, at least in Paris, toward providing Ukraine with capabilities that enable battlefield success rather than just conflict sustainment. If other European capitals follow France's lead, we could see a fundamental acceleration in the quality and quantity of Western military support. Russia was not prepared for this because Russian strategic planning has consistently underestimated Western commitment to Ukrainian battlefield success and overestimated Western fear of escalation. Moscow calculated that Western countries would provide enough support to prevent Ukrainian defeat, but would withhold the advanced capabilities that could enable Ukrainian victory. The Caesar NG delivery suggests that calculation was wrong. France just gave Ukraine a weapon system that changes the artillery mathematics in ways that favor Ukrainian operations and punish Russian defensive doctrine. And if this is the beginning of a broader European commitment to providing Ukraine with technological advantages that can offset Russian numerical advantages, then the trajectory of this war just shifted in ways that Moscow did not anticipate and cannot easily counter. This is exactly the kind of development that requires deep analysis to understand properly, the kind of analysis that looks beyond the headlines about weapons deliveries to examine why specific capabilities matter and what they reveal about evolving strategic dynamics. If you found this breakdown valuable, subscribe and turn on notifications because we will continue tracking how Ukraine employs these systems, how Russia responds, and what this means for the broader trajectory of the conflict. The artillery war is not glamorous, but it determines outcomes. And France just changed the rules of that war in ways that Russia was not ready for.